Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our City Council meeting for the City of Newcastle. Today is March 19th. The time is 7:05. Excuse the slight delay in starting. We had some technical difficulties. My name is Mayor Clark. This meeting is being recorded on YouTube, and it is being able to be viewed live on YouTube as well. So please rise and join me in the flag salute. Thank you. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Burford.
Here.
Councilmember Sherlock.
Here.
Councilmember Griffin.
Here.
Councilmember Tallman.
Here.
Councilmember Charbonneau. Here. Deputy Mayor Lacotia.
Here.
And Mayor Clark.
Here.
All here, Mayor.
Thank you, City Clerk. Is there any objections or desired changes to tonight's agenda? Seeing none, show the agenda approved unanimously. We are now moving on to public comment. I have a feeling we'll have a few of those tonight. Public comment, ladies and gentlemen in the audience, if you've not signed up and you'd like to do that, please sign up. You have 3 minutes to comment. Come to the podium, turn on the microphone, please. State your name and neighborhood. At the 3-minute point, a bell will sound. That means you must conclude your remarks, please. We'd appreciate it if you'd wrap it up at that point. So with that, we will start with our list, and I'm going to go down the list in order people signed up. We have Ella Vickers. Please come on up.
Yes. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Ella Vickers, and I'm in 5th grade at Newcastle Elementary. I'm here today because I love art and I want to ask for your help. You see, all the other schools in our district have money available from their cities to help with their art programs, but we don't. That doesn't seem fair. Art is really important. It's not just about drawing or painting. It's about using our imagination and making cool stuff. It helps us think in different ways and everyone has fun. If we got $2,500, we could get new art supplies and things for our school. We could have more art classes and maybe even do some special art projects. That would be greatly appreciated. By helping us with our art program, you're not just helping our school, you're helping us kids learn and grow. And who knows, maybe one of us will become a famous artist one day. So please, can you help us? We promise to make some really cool art with it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ella. Next up is Mary Vickers. Mary?
Well, I don't know how I'm supposed to follow that, but I will try. Good evening. My name is Mary Vickers, and I'm also a proud Newcastle resident. I live in the Olympus neighborhood. I also have the honor of serving as the president of the PTSA at Newcastle Elementary School. I come before you tonight to request your support in also providing a grant of $2,500 to our school for the enrichment of our arts program. As you may be aware, every other school in our district has grants available to them through their cities, and that leaves us out of this crucial support system. This discrepancy has put us at a significant disadvantage when it comes to fostering creativity and providing opportunities for our students to excel in the arts. The importance of arts education cannot be overstated. It is not merely about creating visual art, it's about nurturing creativity, fostering critical thinking skills, and instilling a sense of pride and accomplishment in our students. Research has consistently shown that students who are engaged in the arts perform better academically, have higher graduation rates, and develop important life skills such as teamwork, discipline, and perseverance. With your support, we can enhance our arts program and provide our students with the resources they need to thrive. The $2,500 grant we are asking would allow us to purchase much needed art supplies and other resources to expand our offerings and ensure that every student has the opportunity to participate in meaningful art experiences. Furthermore, investing in our arts program is an investment in the future of our community. By supporting our students' artistic endeavors, we are helping to cultivate the next generation of creative thinkers, innovators, and leaders who contribute positively to our city and beyond. I urge you to consider this immense value that arts bring to our school and our community and to support our request for funding. Together, we can make a difference in the lives of our students and ensure that every child has the opportunity to explore their creative potential. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mary. Next up on the list is Brittany Crosser.
Hi, good evening. I'm Brittany Crosser. I live in Asbury Crest. I wanted to talk also about the arts program. I have two sons who go to Hazelwood Elementary. I serve on the PTSA. The arts program at Hazelwood is primarily funded through PTSA money. However, we've learned recently that there's planned fairly significant budget cuts in the Renton School District in the coming years. So that means there will be more stress placed on PTSA funding and more difficult decisions to be made. This arts grant would help us be able to use PTSA funding to support additional resources, STEM resources, those types of things, to reallocate some of that money to soften the blow. However, in terms of arts education, it also helps develop motor skills, language skills, and social skills in kids. Imaginative activities for young learners can lead to better social interactions and emotional regulation. It helps create cultural awareness through learning about their artists and their lifestyles, as well as creating the art. And the art program at Hazelwood creates opportunities for cultivating community connections. The kids love the art, they love learning about the artists, creating the art, and then sharing the art with their peers and families. The art grant would really help Hazelwood continue to have the Meet the Masters program there. Thanks.
Thank you, Brittany. Next up, Gary Campen.
Gary Campen, Hazelwood. I wish to speak on behalf of Newcastle Trails in support of the Lake Bourne Promenade. It's in the Lake Bourne Park Master Plan, a waterfront path on the east shore running north from the new boardwalk. We'd like to see a portion of the remaining ARPA funds used to fund at least the two essential parts of the promenade, the waterfront path and the landscaping needed to make the east shore a park and shield the path from the parkway. If you apply an inflation multiplier to the cost estimates in the master plan, these basic elements might require a third to a half of the ARPA funds. It would be a giant step for our parks and trails. Lake Bourne Park would expand up the east shore closer to downtown and the dense population living north and east of the lake. The small waterfront of the original park would expand to half the lakeshore. A huge event worth celebrating. The promenade would complete the Lake Bourne Trail around the lake, with the waterfront boardwalk and the promenade its best features. The trail away from the lake includes a wetland segment, a cemetery segment, and other historic sites. The expanded park and trail will expand the scope of possible improvements: a hillside viewpoint, a waterfront pavilion, public art, and other amenities desired by residents. These projects could use public funds or grants or donations. The promenade benefits will be immediate: more recreation accessible to more people, more folks on the trails with health benefits, mental and physical, perhaps more visitors downtown. When we founded the city in 1994, there was a shared vision for Lake Bourne Park, an expanded waterfront with a waterfront trail. A founding father, Giles Velty, used his bulldozer and his political skills to launch the park. It's a fine park, but it's taken 30 years to build the boardwalk. We could fund the promenade now and complete the waterfront trail in 2026, or wait, maybe 30 years. I spoke with Giles. We both want the expanded waterfront soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. There's a few more people on the list, but I would ask when you come up, please speak closer to the microphone at the next few people that come up, please. Thank you. Next on the list is Kevin Orton. Kevin?
Good evening. Kevin Orton, Newcastle. I didn't realize that I was going to be speaking, but it'll be impromptu. It's about 116th Avenue Southeast. I applaud the fact that you're using solar-driven readouts on the stop signs. I think that's an improvement. I also applaud the fact that you use that LED readout for early morning and afternoon traffic for the kids that shows the speed limit. You've also put in place the hardware for a speed reading sign that it appears that you're moving the actual guts of it around to the various locations that you've earmarked as necessary for. I would wish that you would find a way to leave it as a permanent display. Based on my experience, and it's only visual, it does work. It does slow them down. Doesn't stop them from speeding, but it does slow them down. I would think the only way you're ever going to improve that kind of speed issue on that road is either through bumps or some way of regulating how traffic can move through there at rate, because when the signs aren't flashing, they're speeding. So anyway, thanks for at least, I notice it's on your list for discussion, and it's also in your funding stream, downrange at least, if you can find the money to put in some permanent speed reduction measures, and that would be great. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. Next up on the list is Jessica Veazey. If I'm saying that wrong, I apologize.
No, you did great. You did fabulous. And I talk kind of loud, so maybe you don't want me to talk so close to the mic. But thank you so much for having me and for this forum. I'm here in partnership with our other local Newcastle schools. I'm the PTSA president from Hazelwood Elementary. And we are here to request your support for our arts programs in the local schools through a grant from our city government. With the support of Newcastle City Council, we aim to further enrich our arts program and ensure equitable access to high-quality arts education for all of our students. Therefore, we're seeking the grant of $2,500 per year to support initiatives, including procurement of art supplies, including paints, brushes, canvases, musical instruments. We'd really like to facilitate hands-on learning for the kids. We'd love to get more local artists involved in our schools and try to bring in that sense of community with our art programs. And we are also, right now, we have a program that the PTSA pays for. It's called Meet the Masters. So we learn art history through the different masters throughout time. We have currently 18 of the 36 artists in the curriculum. If we have all 36 artists of the curriculum, every student would go through every artist through their 6 years in elementary school. So that's a goal we're working towards. Investing in our arts program, the Newcastle City Council would not only be investing in the academic and personal development of our students, but also the cultural vibrancy of our town. Expanding arts at all schools within Newcastle City would match the standards set by those in cities around us. Many of the other cities have the opportunity to get grants through their city, but you have to have business licenses through those cities, which we do not reside in. We research, as everyone has stated, arts are important. Arts are super important for kids' fundamentals. So we're confident that with your support, we can continue to nurture our kids and in an environment where children can explore their creativity, express themselves, and discover their unique talents. Not every kid is great at math, but most of them can pick up a pencil and get creative. We thank you for considering this grant request and hope that you will look at it as an opportunity to grow. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Next on the list, and I'm sorry, it's a little off signature, Ron Rothstein. Sorry about that. Thank you. Come on up, Ron.
So I'm Ron Rothstein. I live on 116th Avenue, so I will be talking about that. Continue, and sorry for my handwriting, by the way. That's it's the best hieroglyphics around. And I'll try to continue from where Kevin was. So 116th Avenue at times is a race course, especially at night. We have a passage from a lot of people who own sport modified vehicles and probably go into the races in Renton and use our street as a warm-up avenue. I would like to encourage the city to put as many traffic abatements or control measures as possible. In addition to the list that I read online, I would like to propose more four-way stop signs. It's a great measure of controlling traffic. It's not a very expensive one to employ. I would also like to implore to have crosswalks drawn on the road. There was a lot of work done on the sidewalks to provide accessibility, but those accessibilities end up in a street which is quite wild. So I believe crosswalks for most drivers will be something for them to watch out for people. I know that when I cross the street to the other side where there is a pathway, it's at times dangerous. Cars don't stop. And last but not least, I've tried to read the state law about automatic speed cameras. And I think that at least in part of the street, which is a walkway to a school and pathway to schools, we can deploy automatic speed cameras. And again, I would like to implore on us to evaluate that option as well. And of course, if we have the budget, or if we can divert budget from other reserves, putting speed, and I was corrected, speed humps or recursions on the road will be the best solution to actually deter people from speeding. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Next up, Allison Sweeney.
Good evening. My name's Allison Sweeney. I live in the Olympic Ridge neighborhood. And I have just 2 requests. I told me to get closer. Oh, it does make a difference. Allison Sweeney, Olympic Ridge. And I have just 2 requests from everybody this evening. It's to have honest conversation and financial transparency when discussing the ARPA funding tonight. In the Financial Committee recommendation, it is recommended that just shy of $300,000 be spent on a 12th officer for 2025 and 2026, as well as the additional money for fire increases. I think that a very real conversation is owed to the Newcastle taxpayers about how the 12th officer will be funded in 2027 and beyond, as well as what happens if we don't get the officer. Do we lose the ARPA money because it's not spent by 2026? Do we lose almost $600,000? This honest and factual conversation should happen in this room before anything is voted on tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Next up, we have Zoe Deering. Zoe?
Much shorter than everybody else. Good evening, everyone. My name is Zoe Deering. I live in Ridgewood, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the Issaquah Sustainability Ambassadors team, which consists of myself, Sienna Good, Matthew Fisher, and Andrew Kim. Sustainability Ambassadors is a youth-led nonprofit with a mission to rapidly advance a sustainable future. Tonight, I would like to speak on our current work and future plans to help the Issaquah School District implement a district-wide sustainability policy similar to what Bellevue School District did almost a year ago. The Issaquah School District spans over a number of cities, including all of Issaquah, parts of Newcastle, Renton, and Sammamish. With over 19,000 students, the Issaquah School District has a very large impact on not only our youth education, but also community environmental impacts. Because of this, we would like to ask for your support in our initiative to help the school board create a sustainability policy. In conclusion, we ask that the council constructs a letter of recommendation to the Issaquah School District to collaboratively work towards meeting regional climate goals. We have already received letters from both Issaquah and Sammamish's city councils supporting our initiative. Your help would be much appreciated. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Zoe. Next up, Ed Flash. Ed?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ed Flash. I live in the Milepost neighborhood. I've been a resident of Newcastle for 17 years, and I'm very proud to call Newcastle my home, and I would like to be able to do that well into the future. Newcastle has a unique opportunity in that we are being given the task to have to spend and allocate ARPA funding. When you're deciding to allocate these dollars, I urge the City Council to think about Newcastle's future financial sustainability. Rather than allocating the dollars for operating budget expenditures that we are only going to see the benefit of for potentially 1 year or one period, I would like the council to think strategically when allocating these funds and think about items that will benefit the city for many years to come. The City Council needs to think about how we are going to operate this city long term. Are there items that we can be spending on now that will help us generate revenue into the future to help out the top line as an alternative to raising taxes? Are there things we can be investing in now that will help reduce expenditures and create efficiencies in future years? We need to be investing in our future rather than expensing for today. Are there items we can be investing in that would draw people to Newcastle who would then shop at our businesses and create tax revenue? Examples of this would be, for example, an art trail walk around Lake Bourne that would be unique enough to be an attraction to the city, or laying the groundwork for ultimately a community center. I would ask the council to do much needed work and consider the demonstrated benefits on all proposed expenditures before any decisions are made. Let's make some real strategic decisions on funding that is going to benefit Newcastle into the future. These are really important decisions that require the right amount of analysis and thoughtfulness, as the ARPA funds are the taxpayers' dollars. Thank you for your commitment to the future of Newcastle and for all the work you do to make this place a great place to live. And I'd also like to reiterate what was said about arts funding. As you know, I'm president of the Newcastle Arts Council, and we feel also that it's very important for funding for the arts. I want to make it very clear that I think the ask is $2,500 per school, so that would be $7,500 for all 3 schools in Newcastle. And if you want an example of this, just go to the Newcastle Library. There's our youth art exhibition up there, and you can see the wonderful art that is done by some of the residents of Newcastle. So thank you again.
Thank you, Ed. At this point, that is the end of my list for public comment. I'll give one more chance. Anybody in the audience would like to come up? Anybody else? No? Go ahead, Peggy. Microphone. Button at the base.
Where? Okay, I'm Peggy Price. I live in Wintry, and I do use 116th a lot. I guess we have to decide whether or not we want it to be a neighborhood road where we want it to wind a little bit or have bump outs and have it really slow, or consider that it's the only alternative to Coal Creek Parkway and I-405 to go north and south. So that's a hard one because it goes right next to schools. And I guess we have to decide exactly what kind of road we want it to be and how we're going to get it there. And I would like to push for the funding of a trail up the east side of Lake Bourne. It could go all the way to 76th, directly north of the park, and it would end up right between the 2 retirement centers. So they all have access to an ADA trail into the park, which could be really nice for them, and especially visitors to them. They could bring them to the park. I think that would be really great, and it would be permanent. It would be something that we'd always have, and the next pandemic, we'd still have it and we could still use it. I think it would follow the spirit of the funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. City Clerk, there is nobody online to be sure, right? Okay, all right. That concludes our public comment. I want to thank everybody for making comments. It's nice, this is the second meeting in a row we've had a relatively good turnout in this auditorium rather than the usual 1 or 2 people. So thank you for coming. Moving on, next thing on our agenda is there's no ceremonial presentations tonight, so we'll be moving on to council comment. Councilmember Charbonneau, please start us off.
Sure, thank you. Thank you everyone for coming out. Love to see some young folks in the audience as well. I wanted to, on the topic of schools, I met with our Renton School Board Director, Pam Teal, this weekend. Had a good productive conversation with her. One thing I wanted to ping for my colleagues, I guess, is there used to be a pretty regular meeting, sort of meet and greet between the Renton School Board directors and the Newcastle City Council that has not happened since COVID. So I'm going to try to organize that and work with her on that. And then I also dropped off to folks, and I have a few extras I put on the table over there. Sorry, folks that are virtual, for the Renton Schools Foundation annual lunch that I'll be attending, and I invite folks to attend as well. And then I was also really excited to see the something I advocated for in the legislature. I know Councilmember Burford had to, and other folks in the past, the Lunar New Year bill from our Representative Mila Tai. It's finally passed after a couple of years of not passing to law, but now Lunar New Year is officially a state holiday, which I think is awesome, and we got to sort of support that as a city. That is all I have for tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Tallman, please.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank everybody for your participation, for your comments tonight.
Councilmember Griffin.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. I wish to welcome everybody here this evening. It's been great to hear your comments and your wishes, and it's hopeful that in some way we will help you out at some point. So, but welcome, and glad you're here.
Councilmember Sherlock.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Thank you all for coming and stepping up to the podium. That's not easy to do, so thanks for your bravery. I also wanted to just highlight and say thank you to the Planning Commission and all of the city staff that put on a wonderful event at Hazelwood last week, talking about the comprehensive plan, and I just thought it was really well done and very interesting conversations are happening. So thank you, and it sounds like that display is downstairs in this building, so if you can still participate through, what's the date? April 14th. Thank you.
Councilmember Burford.
Thank you everyone for coming. Really, I'm so happy to hear our students. You're so brave and so, articulated so well, and also with all the adults and all the residents. It's great to have this great turnout. Always happy to hear you, and also I want to say a kudos to our planning commission. I was also at the open house at Newcastle Elementary, and just on the 13th. I think 40 to 50 people signed up, and actually some people didn't sign up. So the entire event, I stayed there from the beginning until the very end. I was very happy to interact and to talk with a lot of people and residents. And also, I would like to share, I think Councilmember Charbonneau mentioned on the March 13th, truly a milestone. I'm honored and grateful to join HB 2209, Lunar New Year Bill. I attended the bill signing along with our governor and community leaders. This is really House Bill 2209, establishing Lunar New Year as a legislatively recognized holiday. This is a legal holiday in our state. I'm so grateful. We had a great success last year celebrating Lunar New Year in our city. And this year we doubled the attendees. I'm so grateful, and thank you all the council members who attended our Lunar New Year celebration. And I testified in person last year and this year in front of a House committee and Senate committee. It wasn't easy because they notified you just like suddenly, but I made my effort. I drove to Olympia, I did, because this is really important. We have almost 37% Asian population in our city. True recognition matters. Representation matters. This really shows the true belonging, a sense of belonging I felt I truly felt it. Here, I would like to also thank City Mayor of Bellevue, also testified twice in front of House Committee and Senate Committee. Also, Macotillo Council Member Jason Moon also testified. Our Council Member Paul Charbonneau also testified in the past. And we have state commissioners and people, also students, elementary and middle school students and teachers. They also went there testified. Here, I would like to say, from our representative Million Tai, this is a moment. Lunar New Year is a time of joy, family reunions, and traditions, which are shared by billions of people across the world. Recognizing this holiday sends a clear message to those who honor Lunar New Year. Your heritage is respected and celebrated in Washington State. This is another step towards further cultural inclusivity. So you can learn more about, you can go to her website to hear recent press release. Also, I have been in the community. I also attended our local Hazen annual Booster Club fundraising. I'm so grateful to see what a great community we have in our city. Together, they reached the biggest funding with $68,000. I am the only council member. I'm so happy to witness their success. And also, I was also at Thank You Frosty Barrel for really actively doing partnership and collaboration with our city and with our police department. So, please stand up because you're there. I want everybody to know our chief, our Newcastle chief was there. Also our officer. Would you please let everybody know your name, please? Yes, our officer. Also, we have 2 more police officers there as well. Yeah, so we got to see a lot of people from the community. Some people, they were there waiting for them. They knew the event. So we look forward to further next month, and I think until summer, right? Alison? So Frosty Barrel will keep hosting this event, right? It's a Sunday with a cup at Frosty Barrel on a Sunday afternoon. This is for our public safety. So thank you. This is my comment. Thank you very much. It's a little bit long, so thank you for your patience, yeah, and understanding. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Lacotia.
Thank you. Good evening, and everybody. Thank you for coming, and thank you for all the public comments. And I also want to acknowledge Zoe for your comments on sustainability. I have always been a big proponent of composting in our city of Newcastle, and you know, we will definitely look through and think through with our team internally regarding your request on sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you, council members. Moving on, mayor's comments. I just have a couple things. Like a couple people mentioned, our planning commission is working really hard, working on the comp plan. So if that's something you've never heard before, or you're new in the audience and you want to know more about the comp plan, there's a lot of information on our website. This is a critical plan that determines the future, really, a layout for the next 10 years of our city. So get involved, learn about it, contact your council members here, contact your planning commission members, stick around after the meeting and ask us a couple questions. The planning commission is doing a really good job, and they're working hard to, you know, come up with and analyze our entire current plan and see how it can change. So kudos to them. They're doing a really good job. Reminder to all council members, I'll just put this out there, your F1 forms are due on April 15th for your campaigns, even if you're just recently elected, everybody, y'all should know about that. Last thing I want to say is on March 29th is Vietnam War Veterans Day. It's the 52nd year from the end of the war. So in 2012, President Obama opened a 13-year window to allow veterans to be pinned. What that means is that if you're a veteran that served between 1955 and 1975, there's a little more specific than that, but you're eligible to get a Vietnam veteran commemorative pin. It's a way for the government to say thank you for your efforts. And there's a number of ways you can get these pins. You can contact me. I can get it through my VFW post. All of our congressmen, congresswomen have representatives in their office that can do that as well. So if you're interested or if you know of a Vietnam vet who's maybe not aware of this, we'd like to recognize every single Vietnam veteran. You know, we have, this program's only open for another 1 year till Veterans Day of 2025. So keep that in mind. Please spread the word, Vietnam veterans. You don't have to have been in Vietnam, a Vietnam veteran era veteran, okay? And that concludes my comments for tonight. So we're moving on. The next thing on our agenda, we have the 2023 year-end financial report, and Director Chambers is going to present to us.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I'm going to get situated. I'm happy to present the 2023 fourth quarter report tonight. As you know, we are now presenting a quarterly report to the Council and public as a whole with the goals of improving transparency and understanding around current spending. This is intended to be more high level and broad than the snapshot that we provide monthly to you, hopefully in a format that's easier to understand and digest for the general public. So tonight I'll be going over, adding a little bit more information. Last time I know we reviewed a lot about the format of it, and I'll touch on that again a little bit because we have some new council members that may have not heard it presented before. But to start off, the introduction just establishes what the report is doing and the time frame that we're reporting on. So for this case, it is December 31st, 2023. So this includes data for the entire year of 2023. Going into the first section is all about general fund revenues. And again, this report is more specific with the general fund. It gets into more detail with the general fund, and then it's kind of supplementary for the other funds. But in regards to general fund revenues for the year overall, we were at 94.8% of what we had budgeted, which is good considering that we started off the year pretty slow. We saw in the second half, and especially in the last quarter, some of our big revenues like sales tax and development revenue picked up quite a bit. So we ended the year at 94.8%. The chart after that speaks to the categories for general fund revenue and compares them to the prior 2 years. This data, again, will always be through the quarter of that year. So when we're looking at first quarter, it's always going to be data through that first quarter for the last 2 years and the current year. So you'll be able to see year over year how these items are doing. There hasn't been a significant amount of change to prior years other than our transfers and other sources revenue, which is when we did the ARPA transfers back and forth in 2022. Our sales tax, as I said, came in strong. I did want to touch on, after this report was completed for the packet, I got information regarding our sales tax for all of 2023 from Azabar, which is the vendor that we use to compile the data and track it for us. And what they put together is that for the year 2023 for sales tax that was reported, on average, it was 45% to online sales, so just under half was online sales. 33%, 1/3 for retail sales, meaning our brick and mortar stores here in the city physically. And then the remaining 23% was related to construction. So that gives you kind of a breakdown of where we stood for the year on those items. There wasn't much other I wanted to talk about verbally based on what's listed in the report. The end of the year tended to follow what we were seeing the rest of the year. We started off pretty slow, but as I said, we picked up towards the end of the year and ended up okay. Moving on, the next section covers general fund expenditures. So we have a couple charts at the beginning that show both the budget to actual for each department, and then also the actual numbers and percent used. So as you can see in the chart, we ended up overall in the general fund at only 84.8% of our budgeted amount, which was very good to see. We did, as you know, make some big changes throughout the year regarding staffing and some other things, and staff really made an effort to reduce their spending where they could. So I think we can be happy to see that we ended up at 84.8%, offsetting the revenue that was a little bit higher. So that's good. Overall, that meant that we ended the year. So initially when we had adopted the budget, we were expecting a deficit between our revenues and expenditures. And we ended up having it swing the other way to the point that we had almost $600,000 in revenues over expenditures. We do need to take into account that we had some expenses for 2023 that were not made in 2023, and they're going to be carried forward. We'll see those on the budget amendment at the next meeting. The biggest one of those is the December 2023 payment for the police contract. So that'll be $272,000 that will be rolling forward. But even when you take that into account, we still were over $300,000 to the good, which is almost $1 million swing from what we had adopted as a budget. So very good way to end the year. We do have a couple other things such as some IT services, Puget Sound Clean Air costs, some audit costs because the audit started so late in the year, it continued on into this year. So all of those items that are going to be carrying forward into 2024 will be included on the budget amendment that you'll see at the next meeting. The last chart that's included shows the same departments, but again, looking at the last 2 years. And like I said before, the data is all as of the same quarter, so it gives you a good picture year over year where we're at in those different departments. So when you're looking at it, you can see most of them have stayed pretty steady. It's kind of hard to see the chart because public safety is so far up compared to everything else. It kind of shrinks some. That is where we saw the biggest increase, which we know and we've been having a lot of conversations about. So we can see that that's something that we should continue discussing. After that, I will go into talking about our other funds. So on the last page, the chart shows each of the funds other than general, the revenue and expenditures with the budget to actuals, and then the percentages that were either revenue received or expended. And looking at these in particular, we can see transportation capital, parks capital, both had they both had expenditures that were quite a bit under what was budgeted. And the reason for that is we had some projects that were delayed throughout the year and didn't get started until later on. So those are both going to have items that are carried forward on the budget amendment, and that's for the projects that are in process right now. And continued into 2024. We also had a little bit low revenue because we had some funding, some grant funds that were not received in 2023, but we'll be expecting the reimbursement in 24. So that will also be included in the carry forward items. Looking at REIT, we were pretty low. We had only 69% of the revenue received that we budgeted for due to the slowdown in housing sales. But the good news is that the transfers out of REIT were also below budget because of some things that we planned to purchase or capital projects that didn't happen yet. And so it kind of offsets the lower revenue. Both IRF and facilities had, again, capital items, some of those that were supposed to be reimbursed by REIT. So they both had capital items that were just not placed or not available. For instance, one of the vehicles we were not able to get. So that item's moving forward into 2024. And again, we'll see that on the budget amendment that you guys get. So good to know. I think overall, staff did what they could to try to reduce spending. A lot of what we're seeing in reduced expenditures will be carried forward. But it's when you're looking at the lower revenues, it's offsetting for the most part. So not a big concern with those. but the one fund I want to highlight is the street fund. It's the one that's the biggest concern for us. When we were looking at November month end, we were pretty close to being on trend to get to the budgeted amount for the year. And then we started getting the invoices in late December and some things that we paid in that open period. So the beginning of January, we have the 20 days that we can continue to pay invoices for the previous year against that budget. We had over just about double what we paid in December than what we've been averaging over the year. So 154,000 just in December alone that was paid out in expenditures, and about 100,000 of that we didn't really know prior to the end of 2023 before getting those invoices. I want to take responsibility for not having the foresight to bring forward a budget amendment, because what ended up happening is that we did overspend what we appropriated in that fund once everything was said and done and we ran the year-to-date numbers. In hindsight, we could have brought forth a budget amendment as a cautionary move. It didn't seem necessary at the time, but it's now been proven otherwise. So that's on me. In late January and early February, once everything had been paid and we started running some year-to-date reports to look at where we sat for the year, we started having some conversations internally because we saw that that the street fund had this issue. We discussed it with Finance Committee at the January meeting and brought it to their attention, and we've continued to have talks internally as staff regarding what caused this to happen within the street fund. The core issue that we found is related to our ILA with King County for street services and kind of the lack of controls that we've had over the costs that are associated with it. So we've already talked and come up with some ideas and options and are working to develop a plan to find a way to handle that better. In the past, it's kind of fluctuated year to year, not as significantly as we've seen in the last couple years. So it's something that we're going to make sure that we're paying close attention to this year and make sure that we're partnering with King County as best we can to keep that more in our control, because it's hard when you get those invoices, the work's been done, and it's been increasingly difficult to track what we're going to be paying for those services as the invoices are coming in. So it put us in a bad place for 2023. The street fund itself still has a positive fund balance, which is good. So the street fund isn't out of money or anything. But our goal is going to be to work on control within that fund to make sure that something like this doesn't happen in the future. So I wanted to make sure I brought that to your attention because it is one thing that we're concerned about looking at the fourth quarter, this fund specifically, but also reassure you that it's on our radar and that we're actively working to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again. I did reach out to SAO to see if there was anything that we need to do proactively or be concerned about. And as of right now, they haven't given any feedback regarding consequences or anything like that. So we'll make sure to continue that conversation with them as we go through the state reporting process and the eventual audit for 2023. But we just wanted to make sure that we touched on that tonight and discussed it. That was the rest of what I wanted to include. The last section of the report is just a conclusion to kind of talk about the overall trends that we've seen through this point in time. So like I said, we had over a $1 million swing within the general fund based on some spending that was delayed, but also staff measures to reduce expenditures. And then, as you know, we took a fairly conservative approach to the 2024 budget. We'll continue monitoring things as closely as we can. We've transitioned our accounting software and now have a much easier time running reports to be able to analyze what's going on, which will be helpful for both myself and providing that information to the directors so they can also have a more hands-on approach. And then lastly, the cash balance will always be included, and this is the balance of both our LGIP and our operating account. We do also have a City Hall operating account, but I didn't include that because that's strictly for this building and it's not money that's available for our regular operating and capital funds. But as of December 31st, the total for those was $21,474,015.20, and that's just under $1 million. That's in our operating account for cash flow, and then the remainder is in the LGIP investment account. And that investment account continues to earn, it's averaging about $90,000 a month right now in investment interest, which is really great. So we continue to see that both in January and February. So with that, we hope that this report will offer a good summary version of the city's financial status. It's easy to read and comprehend for both council members and the public alike. It will be also a good checkpoint for us to look back year over year and see how we're doing and how things are trending. And I just want to say thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you, Director Chambers. Are there questions? Councilmember Sherlock, go right ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for your report. I just wanted to ask, has the dashboard been updated with this new information, or will that be updated soon?
Yeah, I think a good portion of it is updated. I would say at least half. I know that the financial charts that are in there, those I took a look and have been updated. So we did include the link at the bottom of this report, so it'll be published too.
Cool. Thank you.
Any other questions for Director Chambers? Okay, I'll simply add, thank you. I know, don't beat yourself up. I mean, our finance department is light years over where we were when I started on the council, so, and that's largely to your efforts, so thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much. Okay, folks, moving right on. The next thing we have on our agenda is council committees. Okay, anybody with a council committee report? Councilmember Tallman, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. So as you all know, the number one concern of our residents is public safety. That is our number one priority as a city council, to address public safety, all public safety issues in Newcastle, including streets. There's a lot of talk about street safety. So along with that, what we've done is we're forming an ad hoc public safety committee. Mayor Clark and I have had several interviews already with interested residents. We were hoping to have it wrapped up by tomorrow, but due to scheduling challenges, we'll probably have it wrapped up by midweek next week. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor LaCourtier.
Thank you. So our economic committee met for the first meeting, and we initially talked about our goals. And a few things that we will be working on is we will be researching, and we've learned of some grants out there. So we will be researching on grants for signs. We will be researching on grants for EV chargers because recently it was announced in the Washington state that Washington state is going to deploy 5,000 EV chargers all over our state. So we're going to explore that, and I'm sure there are a lot of grants available out there for our city that we can leverage. And the other thing that we talked about was we're going to create an inventory of all the parcel or the land that we have in our city, just to kind of keep track of it. Yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
Any other council committees? So last meeting, I skipped over the Finance Committee in error because I was trying to rush through to the public safety, and I thought we had just done it. So that error is mine. I know there was some comments about it. It was not an oversight on purpose, so my apologies. The responsibility is mine. Any regional committees? Councilmember Charbonneau.
Thank you. I attended the Sound City Association Public Issues Committee. Things on the radar, they talked about the Crisis Care Centers levy that passed for more mental health response beds. They went over the implementation plan for that moving forward and building those centers. We had a regional wastewater services plan update. And then there's one, in terms of there's only one thing looking forward to the rest of this year. There's one small levy renewal. There's no new levies being that would affect us. There's small individual ones in different school districts in different pockets of the county, but only one that would affect us, and it's very small renewal for fingerprinting services. And then I'll just include the plug I always do for that committee of I'm happy to take feedback from residents or colleagues because it is probably one of the largest sort of regularly gathering committees of every city in the county. So I'm always happy to take ideas there. Folks have them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Charbonneau. Just a quick question. Is there anything that you need from us as a council to take back to your next meeting?
Thanks for the question. That's a good one. I mean, largely it's getting updates and then sort of hearing what other cities are doing. So, I mean, if folks have things that they're curious about, how other cities do it, I find it to be a good practice to go in and be like, hey, how would, you know, like, for example, I think with the letter that the Issaquah Youth Ambassadors wanted to send, my first move would be to like, oh, Issaquah, can we take a look at your letter so I can reference that, right? So it's kind of in that same spirit, right? If you have something that you've seen at another city or another place that you like or you're interested in, it's a good sort of place to ask about that, is what I would say. I don't need to prepare too deeply unless there's a project we have that we want feedback on I could bring forward, or like a process I could bring forward for feedback. But otherwise, I think it's just kind of hearing and absorbing what other cities and folks do and then getting the kind of like the higher level updates. So hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. Just a reminder that council members, I also am on a group from the Sound Cities and North Mayors group, but it's a much smaller group than what Councilmember Charbonneau's on. So if there's something, you know, we talk about everything, at least in my meeting. So if there's some issue, that's the perfect time to get direct contact with a whole bunch of cities at the same time. So if there's something on your mind, email Councilmember Charbonneau and let's get some answers. Okay, moving on. The next thing on our agenda is the Community Activities Commission report. Do we have anybody that's scheduled to give that report?
Well, we have the written report. Ed is here and is welcome to give a verbal report, but I don't think that was planned.
Okay, all right. Not to put you on the spot. Thank you. Okay. And also for the members of the audience and listening public, the numbers that Director Chambers talked about can be found in the meeting packet. So there is a whole section there that discusses in detail what she just talked about. Okay, moving on. City Manager, what do you have for us?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. In my update to the Council Friday, I put in an email it's actually from David Hoffman from Sound Cities Association, but it was from Pat Fitzpatrick, who's the Chief Administrative Officer in Kent. And previously he was their city attorney. And he brought to our attention what could be a very significant proposal from the Washington State Bar Association regarding caseloads for public defenders. Currently, the allowed caseloads for public defenders is 400, and the State Bar Association is looking at reducing that to 120. That would be a significant cost increase for us as far as our costs for providing public defenders for our court participants. He kind of put it out there as here's the issues and encouraged everybody to participate. I just wanted to bring it to the council, put the question in front of the council and happy to take feedback now. If we want to do something about this, if we want to, we could do a letter, we could adopt a resolution if we want to oppose what's being presented. The biggest challenge with this item is that the Washington State Bar Association, there's not a legislative fix or a legislative anything to oppose. It's the Supreme Court establishes Washington court rules. And so they'll decide without other scrutiny or being able to change it otherwise whether this goes through or not. And so the action for us to take would be speaking when we have a chance to speak, and then if there's something that the council is united on, we could adopt a resolution or provide a letter or all of the above if we want to oppose this change. For context, we spent just about $40,000 in public defender costs in 2023, and that could almost quadruple for with the margins in our general fund, that hurts. So, I guess feedback I'd love from the council is, do you want to think about it, or I wanted to put the question in front of the council, do we want to do something? I can certainly put drafts together or get more information if you want it. Just looking for feedback if we want to do something.
Go ahead, Councilmember Chevron.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'd be interested if you can keep your ear to the ground of, I assume other cities would have the same reaction about this. It's what like the general action that's happening is. I think like always adding on to that and then augmenting that is always a good option to sort of amplify your own voice. So I'd be interested to see what I assume SCA would put something together. Even if it's like King County cities or whatever the sort of like push is, if you can keep your ear to the ground for that, I would be very interested to see what that manifests as personally.
Councilmember Tillman.
So just for clarification, one of the last sentences says that a change of the caseload limits will likely be proposed to the Supreme Court by the State Bar Association. Does that mean the State Bar Association will certainly or probably push back on the Supreme Court?
No, they're proposing it.
They're proposing it. Okay. Well, I would like to recommend that we make a statement on our behalf and send it to the courts or to the State Bar Association, just to protect our territory.
So I'd like for just a show of hands, I mean, is anybody opposed for the city manager drafting a letter? Any opposition to drafting a letter from Newcastle opposing this item? So city manager, is that enough direction for you?
Absolutely. I'll also report back on any efforts that we might be able to join in with other cities and what they might be doing.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned a resolution. Would a letter possibly be sufficient at this point? What's your thoughts?
I don't know. This doesn't happen all the time, and so there's not necessarily precedent for what is effective. And so I think definitely checking in with what other cities are doing or if they're going to do anything is worthwhile.
One small comment on that. I do think, so the rulemaking process through the Supreme Court, there will be an opportunity for interested parties to formally submit their comments through this whole process. And so for that, we would want not only us to draft the letter, but at least a vote from the city that is the city's voice, right? So it's the actual city council making that statement to the court.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Chevron.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd be really interested to City Manager Pinkel if you could sort of what's missing from David Hoffman's email, and I'm really curious about is the rationale from the Washington State Bar Association. I assume they're compelled to take this action because they would know how folks would react. So if you could elucidate it at all, I don't know if you know anything about it now, or if you could sort of gather that, I would be really interested to see that in a weekly update or hear more where they're coming from, I guess, because from 400 cases to 120 cases per year is a very, very drastic shift.
So I would say city manager, based on what I'm hearing, think about or start to formulate some kind of letter when we want absolutely keep abreast of when that public comment or submission is due, and we definitely want to get our voice in, and we can certainly schedule a vote for that, like Attorney Chambers said. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Okay, next up is our consent agenda. Are there any desires to change or alter the consent agenda? Anybody? Okay, seeing none, show the consent agenda approved as written. Next up is public hearings, which we don't have any of tonight. It's poor English, sorry. No unfinished business. Moving on to general business, we have Director Bronze is going to discuss 116th Avenue Southeast traffic calming options. Director Bronze.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. We were before you in December. I guess it was a council member led discussion item. And at that time, directed staff to come back and present some options for traffic calming on 116th. So that brings us to today. So here's an outline of what we're going to talk about tonight. So first off, I think you're all familiar with the corridor, but just to review, the 116th is a collector arterial. And one thing to point out, I did make a misstatement last time in December. I had talked about that the section of 116th that extends into Bellevue was a different classification. It's not, and that's not correct. It is the same classification. It does have a much lower roadway volume, or traffic volume rather, but it is the same classification as a collector arterial. So I just wanted to apologize for that. The length is about 1.25 miles. Posted speed is 30 miles an hour. Got continuous sidewalks on the east side and a kind of patchwork as development has occurred on the west side for sidewalks. Again, patchwork of intermittent bike lanes. I'll touch on that a little bit later. And then we've got two schools up at the north end of the corridor. So every year we do a traffic volume and speed study, whereas at each of these locations, and these locations are either staff derived or through resident requests for information. So 2 years ago, we added an additional location on 116th, and that's right where that blue arrow is. So we've got 4 locations along the corridor, and that's the next information I'll be presenting. So in December, we talked about the 2023 counts, and the 2024 study was completed at the end of January, early December. So the traffic volumes are there for the 4 count locations. And these are still quite a bit below the pre-COVID numbers of 2019. And one thing to point out that the volumes are much higher on the northern segment, north of 76th. They're twice as high as the next volume segment to the south, and over 3 times higher than the 2 segments lower to the south from that. One thing I was going to point out, compared to 2023, the top number, the 5170, is just about a 2% increase from last year, so pretty similar. But the next 2, the 2440 and the 1860, those are both up about 11% for one and 15% for the other. And I'm guessing that is due to the new roundabout connection going through Coddington that has just kind of potentially changed some driver behavior, that with that new roadway connection that they're going to the north as opposed to staying on May Creek Park Drive and going down Monterey to the freeway. And then the last count, the 1210, is actually down 4.8% from last year. Just wanted to do that comparison from last year's numbers. And then the speeds, 85th percentile speed, again, that's the number, that's a national benchmark used to evaluate speeds. And in essence, if you were to count 100 cars and check their speed, the 85th percentile means that 85 of those 100 cars would be going that speed or lower. So it's the general intent is that it collects the majority of the prudent speeders. You're always going to have outliers that are going too fast or too slow, and this attempts to weed out and just get the majority of the vehicle speeds. So before on the screen there's last year's numbers, 2023, and this year's numbers, 2024, and they're very similar. In fact, the 5-year data is very consistent with a variance of less than 1 mile an hour amongst the different at each count location. And similarly, the speeds northbound and southbound are also very similar. They're within 3 miles an hour of each direction. And they're consistent throughout the day. There's not a particular hot spot at night or during the day. And one thing, if you were to ask most of my colleagues if they would be happy with speed operations, pretty much everybody would say if it's within 5 miles an hour of the posted speed, then they consider that great and don't have a problem. So I just wanted to point that out, that two of the 4 counts are within that threshold. It's not saying that it's okay, but that's just not something that would be ordinarily flagged as a concern. And then the 95th, this is not as commonly referred, but it's again similar as the 85th. Now this would be only 5 out of the 100 representative cars would be at the speed or lower. So they're about 5 miles an hour higher than the previous numbers, but still not a big difference. And on average, they're just about 9% above the 85th percentile speeds. One thing to point out, on the graphic there, that's where we have the 2 speed radar signs in each direction. And then another one, we've heard people talk about racing concerns and things like that. So I took a deeper dive looking at the numbers. And this is during the week of the traffic counts, which was January 29th to February 4th. And during that time, broken down by percentage and by average number of vehicles per day, the number of vehicles that were going faster than 45 miles an hour. So I thought this was interesting. So down in the south, where I think we've heard more of the concerns about speeding, there was average of 19 cars per day, so less than 1 per hour, and then 5 vehicles per day. So just to put it in context, so if we were to go back up here, so out of 1,210 vehicles, 5 are going 45 miles an hour, over 45 miles an hour. So not saying that that's okay, but just kind of putting it in perspective. All right, so just a kind of overseeing comment on traffic calming. It's always a series of trade-offs that are involved in attempting to do traffic calming. And you've got and a public comment was made tonight. There's a balance between maintaining an efficient network as well as the livable and safe environment for bikes and pedestrians. In particular, for this corridor, we have to take into account emergency response needs, and then obviously funding for whatever measures might be contemplated. And then the biggest challenge is finding the appropriate measures that reach a desired balance for that particular corridor. And even different spots along the corridor may have a different desire, because the north end, you've got schools and a little bit more dense development. Down at the south end, you've got less traffic and actually less of a speeding concern based on the data. Other factors that are less concerning, but just to keep in mind, maintenance responsibility. So if you were to imagine 18 speed humps along the street, that's going to impact our ability to do snow and ice control. There's also accessibility and I don't think anything when we're talking about is property access, but if you start talking about medians and things like that, that might be a concern. All right, so this I think is the same information that was in the agenda bill, but here's for a collector arterial, and I make that distinction because there are certain tools in the traffic calming toolbox that are not on this list, and that's by virtue of it being a collector arterial. And these are listed in decreasing ease of installation and increasing cost. And we'll go over each of these one by one. So first off, at the top of the list, meaning the easiest to implement and the cheapest, would be reducing the speed limit and then speed radar signs. And I'll just leave the information up there. I kind of have a similar matrix of data for each one. And then I'll touch on the effectiveness. City of Seattle, in their efforts a few years ago, they reduced all their arterials to 20 miles an hour and all their local streets to 20. And they've demonstrated about a 10% speed reduction in the 50th percentile. So that would be 50 vehicles out of 100 are going that speed or lower. And about a 7% speed reduction on the 85th percentile, which for the speed from 30 to 25, that's about a 2 miles an hour change. And then the radar signs, they're about, this is from City of Bellevue's data, about a 6 to 8 mile an hour speed decrease. Next up is wide edge striping and reduced lane widths. I was just reading an article that Director Fitzgibbons had forwarded from it was a planning document, and it's the first time I'd actually seen a conclusive study. Anecdotally, I'd known this, but that lane widths are proven to have reduced speeds, and that's because one of the factors that determines how fast a driver is going to travel is their comfortableness. And a road like 116th is wide open, it's straight. So one of the factors you can do with traffic calming is to reduce that comfort level at traveling at a higher speed. And one of the things you can do is narrow the lanes and also make the lane delineation thicker, meaning a wider stripe that's shown here. Typically it's a 4-inch stripe, and this is an 8-inch stripe. 8 inches is what you typically see at a left turn lane at a signalized intersection. And that so just makes it feel more closed in. That's another one that's pretty simple to implement. Next up is a concept, either raised islands, median islands, or a lateral shift. Median islands, that's a common thing. This picture down below is up in the west side of town. And lateral shift, I'm not aware of any of those used anywhere locally, but it's just an idea that that graphic up above is you take a straight corridor. Actually, City of Sammamish did something like this on a project where you take a straight corridor and you introduce some either curvature or just lateral shifts. And the one challenge on 116th is that would most likely involve, with the exception up at next to the schools, we've got more pavement, but down below it would involve widening of the street. But up at the northern end of the corridor, there's an opportunity to try something like this. And then speed cushions or speed cushions, we talked about this last time a little bit, and both Renton and Bellevue have recent examples, and I'll touch on those in a bit. One of the things to point out, in the prior correspondence that was sent out, there's a number of about $30,000 per hump, and there's a distinction. Typically, depends on when you say a hump. That's one, like right here on the graphic, would be considered 3 humps. So the planning level cost is about $10,500 per hump, and that's all in installed. So that's you think, wow, that's a lot just for a pile of asphalt. Well, it's getting the contractor out there, mobilized, traffic control, the thermoplastic striping, getting the controls in terms of paving it at the right height. I was actually talking to a staff member at Renton, and it's interesting how they didn't have a method to accurately measure the height of that hump, and they came up with a field measurement to do that. But so that's just one of the factors that goes into why the cost is where it is. So typically you talk on a per hump basis, but they're put in pairs, or in this case 3, because if there's if there's not a curb, then you have to put something out there to prevent the vehicles from just going right around on the side. And the effectiveness based on, well, I'll go into that in the next slide. So for Bellevue, this is on 119th Avenue Southeast, just to our north, and they did the installation in 2 phases in 2020 and 2023. And they're actually considering a 3rd phase. If you look, let's see if you can see my mouse, right in this large area here, they've seen speeds increasing because of the large distance between the humps. So they're planning on putting in 3 more pairs at this location. So they've measured a speed reduction of about 2.8 to 4 miles an hour. And then the other thing that was beneficial is that they've seen a significant reduction in high-end speeding. And then over in Renton, their project's newer. They don't have a documented after project results yet. Anecdotally, they said they've noticed a difference in reduced speeds, but very similar to the implementation that was done in Bellevue. The next up, the increasing in complexity and cost would be a mini roundabout, and we're just about to advertise for bids. Actually, tomorrow we're advertising for bids for the roundabout at 84th and 116th. And this is a very effective technique in that it physically slows vehicles down, but it doesn't impact the turning movements of a large vehicle or emergency vehicles like a full-size roundabout that has a non-mountable center island. And overall, you can expect a significant reduction in travel speeds to the intersection. And you would say, well, they would be going to a stop at the stop sign, but the difference is that there can be a large amount of non-compliance of stop signs and people just blowing through them, and then that creates a safety concern when there's an expectation that a vehicle is going to stop and they don't. Whereas here, they're pretty much forced to reduce speed based on the physical constraints of the geometrics. And then another less commonly known item, you can think about as a mini roundabout light, and they've got a few of these over in South Bellevue, and it's basically you take the mountable center island of a mini roundabout and just that. And so it's less effective than a mini roundabout, but it's also easier to implement. So it's through the end there, I thought that was an interesting idea. So then just wanted to mention we've got lots of work that's just about to kick off this summer. And 2 of the projects specifically will impact 116th. The mini roundabout I just mentioned, and then we've got a pavement overlay that is going to go from 76th to Newcastle Way. And with that, there's going to be the opportunity to, actually the project does have a striped median, so some of that extra asphalt, extra pavement width in front of the elementary school will be a striped median. And then we do have the opportunity to narrow the travel lanes and also put in that wider edge striping I mentioned. And then in a future summer, we're going to have, and we already have it prescribed because there's a federal grant for this project. So we have the scope of work already determined, basically paving the majority of the remainder of the corridor except for the work that has been paved by either development or some utility work. So from the south to the north, from May Creek Park Drive up to 84th, which is the Heemstra development, and then again from 80th to Southeast 76th. And that's going to be in summer of 2026. And again, we'll have the opportunity to do the narrowed striping. All right, so what you've been waiting to hear, and this is consistent with what's in the agenda bill, recommended actions, and this is there's two philosophies behind this. Is one, ease of implementation and the quickness of implementation, and that's reducing the speed limit. I just want to pause too. When it gets to time to discussion, I asked Officer Treadway if he'd be available to be able to respond from a police officer's perspective in terms of enforcement, or just to contribute to the conversation. Excuse me. So he's here. Another thing that was in the Seattle study is that they also increased their frequency of speed limit signs. So just to reinforce the fact that the speed limit is there, and reinforcing speed limits also is what the speed radar signs do. And those three things can be done very, very quickly and very easily. The first two can be done in a matter of hanging signs up. And then the speed limit sign, the radar signs are more involved to get installed and ordered, but still relatively straightforward. And then going forward, any kind of physical constraint or physical measures would, the strong recommendation to have an engineering study to determine where those should go, the proper spacing, things like, for instance, speed humps, they have a criteria in terms of a slope of this grade of the roadway. So anything more than about a 5 or 6%, you don't want to put those on there. And other factors to evaluate how they might impact on the whole corridor, as well as we want to consider things like breaking up the corridor. So the intersection of Southeast 80th would be a logical place to potentially put either a speed mound or a mini roundabout. And so that's one of the things that could be potentially considered in that study. Another thing too is when you're constructing physical measures, definitely want to do a public outreach process to make sure that you're not finding out after the fact that you put something in and then you get an outcry to take it back out. So both the Renton and the Bellevue projects had a complete public outreach process, and have a broader sense, and then specifically contacting each of the property owners that are along the corridor. A couple other recommendations. There were some comments about Hazelwood Elementary. That's the segment that has the highest velocity in terms of speeds, as well as the highest volume, and you've got two schools there. So there's a crosswalk, there's two crosswalks, striped crosswalks. The one to the north at Risdon has a raised median island, as well as a RRFB, rectangular rapid flashing beacon, supplementary signage. But there is another crosswalk at the school that does not have any supplementary signs other than the option to carry a flag. So this could be something we could look at. There's various ways to augment that. Well, we could talk about that time, but just wanted to highlight that these aren't not necessarily corridor level things, but just there's opportunities here. And I also mentioned that specifically in this segment, there's it's more feasible to do raised islands or lateral shifts just based on the width of the available pavement. And that's the end of my slides I have prepared. Happy to answer questions. Just this sign is an actual sign I saw when I was on vacation. I thought it was pretty funny. It was on this residential street. And I just couldn't believe that. I'm not sure if somebody just had that made, but it was a real sign on the street. I thought it was pretty funny.
Thank you, Director Bronze. Questions? Who would like to start? Councilmember Charbonneau, go ahead.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you, Director Bronze, that was awesome. Okay, a few things here. One, looking at, I think the item number 4 you had a couple slides back to the recommendation to reduce lane width to 10 feet. And I know there's an item about that being done from the 76th Street, what I call the large hill, or my family affectionately calls the wee hill, if you go down at ELWE. The large hill to Newcastle Way, so I know that's already being done there. First question would be, is that, can we focus on narrowing lanes anywhere else, and where would that be? I think the reason I like that one a lot, personally growing up in the Olympus neighborhood that has some of the widest sort of streets, you see it, it's, people will go very fast there. I think we've all felt it too, where if you're driving and there's, less room on either side of you, you kind of subconsciously, even like I know I do it, will slow down and make sure you're not bumping into things around you. I think it's a really subtle and effective way to get people to slow down. And then also, I think it's also a win-win in the sense that it provides more space and cushion for bikers, which especially near an elementary school, especially near other folks, that meets two goals for us of increasing people's, maybe they don't have to drive as much and they're not driving in the first place, or kids riding their bike or anything. I think it's a really simple and effective way. We looked at all these high cost options to potentially slow people down. Literally just narrowing can be I think, cheaper and really effective way. So I would love to explore doing that other places as well. Is there anywhere we would consider that besides 76th to Newcastle Way?
Oh, yes, actually, that was intended for the whole corridor. Just when I mention it is because we have a overlay project that's happening this summer. So we will be restriping the roadway, and we're planning to do that. One thing, too, past several years when we've done capital projects, we've restriped at 10 and 6 instead of 11 and 5 for travel lanes. So the May Creek Park Drive, the sidewalk west of Coal Creek Parkway, those are, if you drive that, you might notice those are narrowed lanes. Those are 10 feet wide travel lanes, as well as the two projects that are going on this summer, the May Creek Park Drive from the project that was built last year, and the next segment to the east, that'll be striped the same way. And then another street we did add edge striping was on Milepost, 135th going up the hill to the school. Now that doesn't have the wide stripe, but it does have the added lane widths. So yes, we can certainly do this pretty much anywhere. The one place I would not do it is on a road that has a lot of commercial truck traffic, but other than Coal Creek Parkway, we don't really have that constraint.
Awesome, thank you. So yeah, I really strongly would compel my colleagues. I think that's a really simple one to do, as we just heard, and it gives bikers more space. I'm curious, the speed mounts that you showed as the sort of more low-cost option, is there the ability to design that in a way where it could be sort of evolve into a mini roundabout for long-term planning?
Certainly, I think if you were to do a layout of a mini roundabout, you could potentially do a concept level design just to make sure you get the diameter and the location correct, and then just build just that portion, sure, and then come back later, or never just have that as a secondary phase to add the either the splitter islands, or like for instance at 80th Street, there's curb and gutter on the east side, but there's nothing on the west side. So that would be a situation where you could potentially put in a speed mound, if you will, or a half of a mini roundabout, and then come back at some point if it didn't have the desired effects to then add those additional features on the west side.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, and I think, I don't know if that's something we'd want to explore too, looking at, I think the roundabouts are very effective. I personally find them even more effective than the speed cushions per se, and I think just having that physical barrier is really great, but if it's something where we want to have the speed mount and then sort of develop that as sort of a long-term transportation project, I'd love to see that. And then I promise this is my last one. The speed radar signs, did you have a slide on that? I feel like we went through that.
Yes, it was with the reduced speed limit. I kind of, right there.
Okay, so I've heard conflicting things on what we can and can do. So these are just simply, there's no means of enforcement here. It's just flashing at you
just
like, hey,
awareness.
slow
It's
down.
to
Okay.
reinforce, and the fact that it's dynamic. You can, there's different models. The ones down at Renton will have like a little strobe light just to catch your attention. You can put a message to slow down. Right. So there are different, and the main thing is just to remind a driver that, hey, you're going above the speed limit. So there are, there's, I think certain drivers are fully aware of the speed they're traveling, and others, they just, they're just, listen to the radio or in a conversation and their speed drifts. And that's where those are the most effective, is to reinforce that you're not traveling the posted speed.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm a big fan of those too as another sort of lower cost solution. I do think they're not perfect, but I think they kind of get people's attention to sort of go back to the road. So, thank you.
Who else would like to ask a question? Councilmember Tallman, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Clark, and thank you, Director Bronze, for all of your work on this study and sharing it with us. So just for clarification, when you're talking about narrowing the lanes, like from 76th up to Newcastle Way, which seems to be a big issue, but you said there's opportunities to narrow the lanes. The physical road stays wide, but you narrow the lanes with striping, correct?
That's the easiest way. You can certainly do it with, and actually there's a slide that shows that you can add either bulb outs, whereas, let's see, right here, sorry. Actually, you can't really see it, but there's right here, they added two little islands, landscape islands, to have a physical constraint. So that's more expensive depending on if you do an extruded curb. But yeah, so it ranges from just stripe to you can tear up the roadway and move in the curbs, or you can do what they did here in this example is they put in striping and then had intermittent pockets of lane reduction with curb bulbs. And actually in Milepost, they have that there. That was built with the neighborhood. When you're going up the street at the intersections, they have curb bulbs come out whereas the corridor is narrowed. So you can certainly go back and do that after.
So if we were talking about these curb bulbs, would there be some recommendation on how far you would separate them? Would just like be 2 or 3 along that distance, or is there a recommendation?
It basically depends on, drainage, sidewalks. There's a bunch of different factors you take into account, but it's certainly one of the tools in the toolbox that can be used.
Okay, the primary reason for my question is it feels like just narrowing the lane with striping wouldn't really address the racing issue or the speeding issue. I think people are going to speed whether the stripe gives you X amount of space or wider space. I think they're going to speed along that road unless we have some type of physical barrier or some other means of enforcement, like Councilman Charbonneau mentioned. So on 144th down in Renton, there's a school there, and they have the speed cameras. And that wasn't on your list, but what's the legal issue with putting speed cameras in that area where we have 2 schools? And why isn't that an option?
Well, that is an option. It wouldn't be considered traffic calming. That's an enforcement option. So that's why I didn't cover that. But yes, that's an option. The state law was just significantly changed in this last session. My understanding is you can pretty much put them everywhere now. There is some constraints as to where the funding goes. One of the things is whenever you do these, the city enters into a contract with the provider, and after a certain period of time, if everybody drives perfectly, then we have to cut a check to that provider for whatever the cost is. So we're essentially renting the equipment, and then it's subsidized by fines. So that's just something to consider. Prior to this year, you could put them up in school zones, construction zones, and then red lights were the 3 legal areas. But my understanding is that they've broadened the available uses for those cameras. Previously, there's not been a call or support to put those in Newcastle.
And the speed cameras can only operate during school times or any time that the city wants them to operate?
Well, I think with this latest legislative change, I think they can operate at any time.
Okay, it feels to me like if we want to get serious about safe streets, then we either need to put physical barriers to slow the vehicle or heavier enforcement, which would include the speed cameras and heavy fines. And even reducing from 35 to 25, or excuse me, from 30 to 25 seems like we're not as serious about speed. What I see when I walk up and down that street is kids going back and forth to school on the sidewalk. And it feels to me like that's an opportunity to make it a lot safer than just adding speed cushions or other physical things that could actually be more distraction than actually slowing down the vehicle, which is an obstacle. So,
yeah. Well, a couple things to point out. Again, just the cameras would be an enforcement. It certainly would probably have the desired results, but wouldn't be considered a traffic calming option. And then also, too, the thought of being an incremental approach, taking, and then there are, in terms of speeders and erasers, that's, the numbers don't say that's a huge problem, but there are a certain amount of drivers that you have to really have to do severe things to actually get them to stop. So I think you're trying to get the biggest amount of fish in your net, and especially at the lowest cost. So something like reducing the speed costs nearly nothing, and that has a demonstrated effect, and then you can evaluate it and then go from there, as opposed to jumping to something that might be more expensive and then potentially having a negative effect on emergency response. So that's the intent, is to start off and see the things that are proven to have a low cost, and then measure the effect, and then go from there.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Deputy Mayor LaCourtier.
Thank you. Director Bronze, you mentioned like 28 speed cushions or speed humps. Is that what you had in there?
That was based on the length. So the project in Renton is a little bit less than a mile. So I took the number of number of installations in Renton and just extrapolated it for Newcastle. So that was just an estimate.
So what if is it possible for us to just try with one set of speed humps and see,
Just one?
like each is like what, 30 grand, right?
Oh,
If you put
yeah,
like
but
three, like one set of
Right.
speed humps and then see the result if it's impactful, like how many would we need? Would we need 28 or?
Well, so Bellevue put in 2 phases, and they're saying that they need to go back and put in more.
So
both,
can we like try with like one set first? Not the speed cushions, because I've tried the speed cushions in Renton and I was able to speed through at 30 miles easily.
then what do you? I'm sorry.
Speed humps.
Oh no, I would not. Those are not appropriate for 116th because of emergency response.
So you would recommend speed cushions.
Right. Correct.
So how many would you?
Well, I don't
do
know.
you
That's
think
why we need to do it.
Start with like maybe just one set of speed cushions and see, what the impact is.
I don't think that'll have any impact or not immeasurable. Just one.
Okay.
Councilmember Sherlock, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Bronze. I'm wondering, can we just reiterate what we've already got planned to do? Because I just want to make sure that everyone watching and in the audience understands that one of the most expensive options we're already doing.
Correct.
The mini roundabout. And so I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of that. So if we walk away from this conversation not having decided anything, there are already plans to do traffic calming, which is great. It's in our budget. We're actually, I think the developer is paying for about half of it, so that's great. And then on top of the mini roundabout, it sounds like we're planning on doing an overlay on some of these streets just as part of our normal, we kind of every year do some new overlay throughout the city. These are up for this year, which is also very great timing. And my question is, if we change the approach to the striping, would that increase those costs, or is that because we're already doing it?
Right. Yeah. There's no cost. It's just a matter of where you lay out the striping. So that's a no cost item. And the other slides I was talking about, if you were to either add new striping or the widened stripe. So I guess there is a cost from going from a 4-inch stripe to an 8-inch stripe, but on the capital project, the overlay, you won't see that in the rounding of the total project cost, honestly, going from a 4-inch stripe to an 8-inch stripe.
Okay. And then as far as other options since we're already doing work to the roads, is it possible to potentially add speed cushions? I feel like sounds like there's a lot of outreach that needs to happen before that. I'm just wondering, timing wise,
right,
if we have time to do that before the overlay project.
No, and a couple things with the overlay project, it's got federal funds, so I'm not recommending doing anything other than just a standard overlay, and the striping is standard work, but and I wouldn't recommend trying to implement or add in traffic calming devices for a couple reasons. One, because we don't have a study of what's most effective, but also just because of the federal funding, we want to keep that project as simple and straightforward as possible. And then in terms of, I really am trying to advocate for having a measured approach and potentially do something as striping, signage, reduced speed limit. Those are very easy to implement, low cost, and don't involve analysis work. And then while that's implemented, and we can then get the effectiveness the next time we take traffic counts, we could even do one in advance, because to collect the traffic at these 4 measured locations, you want to keep the same locations for consistency, but we could measure those in 6 months for probably less than $2,000.
Okay.
And then we could still proceed with a study and recommend, and then at that point, by the time the study's ready, we would have at least one point of measurement and see how effective any measures we've taken so far have been, and then go from there.
And I know we have a transportation project that's just general traffic calming that is like a program, right? That we, every
Correct.
year,
Right.
we put in, we budget around 70,000, I think is what you said. You
Right.
told me that to do this type of, these less expensive things like more signage.
Right, signs, radar signs,
Radar
that would all
signs.
be, we could cover that under that programmatic project. Anything larger, like constructing physical devices, whether it be mini roundabout, speed mounds, raised medians, or speed cushions, that would be a separate capital project just due to the cost.
So for these smaller things with that program, are there other points in the city that are already slated to use those funds for this year, or would we be able to implement it in this spot this year?
This year, the only committed cost we've done for the T10, the traffic calming, is the rotating speed signs, speed radar signs that were commented earlier. So we put in 2 signs at 6 locations, and then we're paying the operating cost to move those around.
Okay. So we have, sounds like we have the
Yes,
funds.
probably the majority of that 70,000 is unexpended. So I'd say at least 60 of it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So, I mean, just where I'm at, to say it out loud, it sounds like reducing the speed limit to 25, maybe increasing some signs, putting in some radar signs with that fund or that program that we already have in place in our budget. And I would definitely be in favor of that, all that stuff right away. And then since we have 2 big projects already slated, I mean, that's great. I mean, it'd be really interesting to do, like you said, a study after those are done, after later in the year. I would also be in favor of when we do those overlays, playing around with the striping, making it wider, or making the actual stripes wider, but then reducing the width of the street visually. So that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple questions for you, Director Bruns. So, excuse me. So you answered my question about the rotating signs. So we move those around on a periodic random basis, I assume?
No, it's scheduled. They're roughly, because they're on battery, and that's one of the reasons that, or the advantage of that program. When you have a radar sign, you either have to hook it up to electrical power, or more often they're solar powered. And those signs, the benefit of the rotating signs is that those aren't battery power. That somebody from King County, they are under a group, not a group. We set up an agreement with them to manage the signs, so they'll go through. It's about a 3-week basis, which is the lifespan of the battery. Swap out the battery and move the sign. And some of those sign locations may not be feasible for solar power based on where the tree canopy is located. So it's about a 3-week rotation.
With the edge striping and narrowing the road, does that, like somebody said here, that it's not necessarily going to deter speeding, but if you painted bike lane symbols, is that part of the widening? Or
That certainly could be, yes. And that's one of the things I forgot to mention. Here, review bike lanes. There's kind of a patchwork of bike lanes along 116th, especially on the southbound side as developments occurred. And that's one of the things that's we've come up to awareness with the Heemstra development, is trying to have some consistency along the corridor. And there may or may not be room, if we were to narrow the lanes, to actually provide some more continuous bike lanes.
Okay.
And just one other point. You had mentioned there's 2 types of speeding that occurs. There's the intentional and then the unintentional. And things like the striping and things, those are all more to curb the unintentional. If somebody's dead set on going 40 miles an hour down 116th, there's pretty limited things you can do unless you're constructing physical things to either the speed cushion variety or mini roundabouts or raised islands, things like that.
The 25-mile-per-hour signs, like Councilmember Sherlock said, I would be in favor of, first of all, changing the speed limit. That's my opinion, first of all. That's an easy place to start. But adding more signs, do you have and even on May Creek Park Drive, because that's, that would, do you have an idea of how many? Or, I mean, you probably have to look at it, right?
Probably, I've not taken an estimate, but generally, when there's an intersection, you could either, well, depending on the level of the side street volume, you may not want to put, you think somebody turns onto the road. So there's two things. When somebody turns on the road and they come up to speed, they'll be reinforced at about the speed limit. And then it's also a continuous reminder as people drive along. There is you don't want to overpopulate the signs, but it's just kind of more awareness. Because typically on 116th now, there's probably, if I were to guess, there's maybe 4 or 5 along the corridor in each direction. So I don't have a set number, but the signs are maybe $50 a piece. So it's not a cost item. It's just a matter of where's a good spot. Sometimes there's street trees, so you want to have them in a visible place.
You mentioned on a different slide, it's $7,500 approximately for edge striping. I assume that's not including what's going to be done already. That would be
Right. That was just kind of a rough cost of what it would cost if we were just to go out there tomorrow and stripe the whole corridor.
When you restripe, you kind of have to scarf up the old lines. Is that included in that cost, or would you go right because those are wider?
I think depends on the measurement. I think you'd probably, and that's especially if it's time for restriping, you just let the old ones stay, especially because you're narrowing them in. I don't think you'd have to scarify the old lines, but it would depend on the specific installation.
Okay. And then, do you have some thoughts on where you'd put a radar speed sign? I mean, have you?
No, I've not thought about that.
I assume we'd get with our MPO Treadway.
You're right, and that's something that we could handle internally. It's a matter of where does it make sense, where do you have good sight lines, and then a matter of it's much more efficient. It's a lot easier to put them up if you can have radar power. Getting them, just anything dealing with PSE is a major hassle to try and get new electrical service and then the billing. So solar power is much more desirable. So then that'd be the two factors is the visibility of the sign for the vehicles, and then can you power it by solar?
Okay. So, first of all, are there any other questions from the council for Director Bruns? Okay, so this T10 program, and maybe City Manager, you might have to help me out here. T10, or Director Bruns, we already have a budget for T10.
Correct.
In order for us to give you direction, are you going to need a resolution from us, or do you just need us to say with a vote that we want you to put in more speed signs? Or City Manager, how should we handle this? Put you on the spot.
I don't know if Jeff has a preference. I'd love to hear. I don't know that.
I think numbers 1 through 4 can be accommodated with just a general direction, and then that could be covered under the existing budget. And there's another radar sign that we're planning to put in on Coal Creek Parkway just south of the bridge. So say we have about $50,000 of that budget not already accounted for. But either way, depending on how many signs we recommend, we could come back and say, okay, we could do this initial amount, and then depending if we find that there's some more additional locations, we can come back to you and talk about that.
Yeah, I would say once we get into the more expensive things, then we need something more specific from the city council.
So looking at this slide that the Director Bruns has up, reducing speed limit to 25 and including Southeast May Creek Park Drive, does anybody out here have an objection to that? Okay, Director Bruns, let's reduce the speed limit on both of those roads and add additional signs if we could to remind people.
And sorry, one thing, there is, I believe in our municipal code, there doesn't have to be a resolution for that. So that would be direction to come back. I forgot for that specific. We can plan for it, but we can bring back a resolution. So it'd be just to direct staff, bring back a resolution. We put that on consent to officially change those two, and then at the same time get that in the works.
Thank you for that. Yes, we would like to do that, please, City Manager. Then, and then number 2, increasing this frequency of the signs, which we talked about. And we're already reducing the travel lane to 10 feet in one section. I'd like to personally see the reduced lane all the way down.
Yep.
Any objections to that up here on this dais? Okay. All right. And then let's a radar. That's probably going to eat up a part of our budget, right?
What we can do is take a look at how many locations, based on, the two extremes. Like how many could we put in there reasonably efficiently, and then if it's a number that exceeds the budget, we come back and seek direction, or just do what's in the budget and then see where that is.
Okay, because I'd also like to see a permanent radar sign. Any objections to that up here? So I guess you would have to determine a location that's suitable, but if we can add that into, and it's manageable into this budget, or let us know if it's not.
Sure. And we've heard public comment. I've heard from another resident as well, that sign on northbound 116th, just north of 76, we could check. I know there's a bunch of tall trees on the west side. We could see if that one is suitable for solar power. And if not, try and find somewhere along that whole stretch has got tree cover on the west side, so that might be challenging for solar power. Maybe we look at, well, there's a school zone flashers. I'm not sure if those are solar power. We might have a power source already, but yeah, those are things we can work on the details and report back to you.
So I know this issue is a passionate issue. I know we got public commenters in here tonight, and I appreciate you being here. But I do favor the phased approach. We're gonna, work on these things. We can take another survey. It's not gonna stop the crazy nuts who speed at night. But I know our officer Treadway is gonna be all over that, and he's gonna catch them all. So we wouldn't have to worry about that ever again, right? In addition to the lines, if there was a place, as a reminder to people, is to add a couple bike symbols or something, right?
Yes.
Just remind them that that's not some place to drive, wherever that can be. Personally, that keeps me out of there. And the radar sign by Risden, every time I see that, I slow down, right? I mean, some people are gonna become oblivious to it, but I think for most people, it's gonna have an effect if we put it in the right spot, right? So,
right.
Do you have enough direction from us now?
I do. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay.
And I think that's the general sense, is just these are incremental approaches, and some are more effective than others. Maybe certain drivers will respond more to a narrowed lane, others to the radar sign, as you mentioned, and it's just a matter of different tools in the toolbox to try and get effectiveness.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll look for a resolution soon on the speed limits. Okay. Moving on, and item 11.2, discussion, the remaining ARPA spending pandemic plan relief amendments. So, City Manager, do you have something for us?
Happy to kind of summarize how we got to this point. I don't necessarily have a presentation or anything for the council. I guess pushing 2 years ago now, time flies. When the council was considering how to use ARPA funds, they had kind of narrowed the scope to a couple of things, and then the rest was going to be put away. And at the time, the understanding was that that would be allowed. More recently, we found that that is not an allowed use of ARPA funds, as far as just setting it aside or putting it in a reserve fund. And so that's kind of how we got to today. We put that in front of the Finance Committee and then the council towards the end of last year. And then since then, we've basically asked for ideas or desires from the council as to how you would want to spend that money. And so we compiled a list at the February Finance Committee meeting. The Finance Committee provided some recommendations, and so that's in the memo to the council, and that's in the packet, along with the full list of what the ideas that came and the estimated costs, along with what came from the community over the last couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you, City Manager. So I'll open it up to questions. Anybody would like to discuss this topic or add something? Councilmember Sherlock, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I've put a lot of thought into this. It's been helpful to have this running list of ideas from the city manager. He's been collecting it from several different sources around the community. Going through everything and talking with a lot of people and reading emails and getting all the feedback, where my head is at is a focus on economic and community development. And what I mean by that is, what I would like to see is these remaining funds put towards projects that can help grow our local economy or provide community spaces or engagement. When you start adding it up, it goes very quickly. But what I've put together is, from this list, 4 things that about add up to what is the remaining funds. One is the EV charging stations. I was thinking of allocating up to $60,000 to invest in charging stations around the downtown core of the city. I know there are a lot of grant opportunities out there, so I would hope that we could leverage those as much as possible. But I think it's worth investing some money to make sure that some EV charging stations do get installed quickly. And the reasoning is these charging stations will attract people to Newcastle to stop and charge their cars. That incentivizes them to, they kind of have to hang out for a bit, and typically they're gonna go to our local businesses and get some food or go shopping. So that would result in a return on this investment where our sales tax revenue could go up, and that means that the city then receives more sales tax. So to me, that's a good investment with this money. The second thing is the T44 project, Coal Creek Parkway signalized improvements. This is on our current plan, capital improvement plan. It's a pretty expensive project, but we've gotten a lot of feedback over the years that the community really wants this. And what it would do is, if you're not aware, it would create a signal connecting the Safeway strip mall area across Coal Creek to the QFC Tapatio strip mall. And if you've ever tried to turn left on Coal Creek coming out of either of those, it's very difficult and dangerous for cars. And on top of that, you just, as a pedestrian, you don't even try to cross the street there, right? And so it would improve the ability for people to more safely navigate downtown, but especially for pedestrians to be able to walk around and create a more walkable downtown. That actually invites more people to hang out downtown and, again, spend their money. That creates a better local economy, which in turn means more sales tax revenue for the city of Newcastle. The next one is the wayfinding signs. I'm proposing allocating up to $25,000 for this project. We've talked about this. The Economic and Community Development Committee last year spent several meetings putting together this plan to install these signs to, again, direct customers to our local businesses. So you can see the theme emerging, that it's trying to get people to be incentivized to spend money here so that our sales tax revenue increases and our businesses do better. And the last one is the 95th Way Park. So we've recently received a lot of feedback from the community about this park. And this is something that has been discussed on and off for over 20 years in this community. And if you're not aware, there's a big piece of land, the very south end of the city, that the city purchased. And in that purchase, correct me if I'm wrong, Director Bronze, we acquired a grant as part of it that requires a sports park of some sort to be built on that land. Is that correct?
essentially, it was, the grant stipulations are that it be used for public recreational purposes. I think they're okay with just general recreational,
Okay,
whatever the
great.
specific.
Thank you for that clarification. So, again, since being on the council, I've heard people talk about this. Some people get really excited about it. Some people don't know about it, but when you start talking about it, they're like, "That's a really interesting idea. I'd like to learn more." What I would like to see with this money now, we're at the point where there's not a lot left when I do my math, but I would love to see about allocate up to $130,000 for just for the initial design work that's needed to really like move this project forward a little bit and be able to have real discussions on what is possible, how much does it really cost, and allow us to have a really meaningful conversation about that property. Now, how this relates to my economic and community development theme is that if we were to eventually have some recreational fields on that land, that could be a revenue generator for the city. If the city were to rent out those fields to all the various sports in the area, not just the city of Newcastle residents, but or businesses, but the region, there is a need for these fields. I have 2 children, and anyone who has any children knows that you're constantly driving all over the area to various fields, and they're always booked, and it's crazy. So the need is there for sure. But what I'm proposing is really just money to start having information so that we can have a real conversation about what's possible, what we can afford, and realistically. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments? People would like to comment on this discussion. Anybody? Councilmember Charbonneau, go ahead. Go ahead. Tallman, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Clark. So, as I mentioned before, for years, the number one concern and priority of the citizens of this community has been public safety. What you see in the proposal is a heavy emphasis on spending the remaining ARPA funds on public safety. In June of 2022, Town Hall had a meeting to talk about the use of $3.4 million of ARPA funds, and public safety wasn't even on the agenda. It wasn't even entertained. It hasn't been on the agenda of the city council until this year, and we're making it a priority because that's what our residents asked us to do. So there are some concerns that people have about the use of these one-time funds for public safety and ongoing public safety programs. ARPA Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds, SLFRF 2023 Interim Final Rule that was written on September 20th, 2023, gave us through Title I projects that eligible activities include the use of these grant funds on a wide range of public services, including crime prevention and public safety. So there's no question that these funds can be used for public safety programs, which is what we're focused on in this city council. So I would like to stay focused on those fundings. We're not cutting any other programs to fund this, and we're just trying to follow the lead by the community to make this a safer Newcastle. Thank you.
Councilmember Charbonneau, go ahead.
Thank you. So a few things here. I think the first thing I did when I knew we were going to have this discussion was I wanted to look at our most recent community satisfaction survey to try to, not be in my own bubble or just, what are people saying? And I think the community, there's a specific community investment section, which I think is really salient for the conversation we're having now, because we're talking about how we're going to invest money in our community. And the number one choice of over a dozen choices was by over 10% to the second place was adding infrastructure to downtown to increase safety. and create a pedestrian-friendly environment. And number 2 was creating a downtown Main Street and developing more in downtown. And I think there was a large emphasis too in the survey of people want to see where their money has gone. I think that's why, I like the things like the uses of the speed signs, that things show them where their money has gone. I think when I look at this, I think we've already agreed to fund an additional police officer. I voted in favor of that. I support that. And I think, I guess when I'm looking at our long-term picture here, I feel like sort of this, we're paying for some critical infrastructure items, which I like. I think generators is a great investment. I think traffic calming is a great investment. I think public safety is a good investment. But what I struggle with is that we just had a report from our finance director that our revenue is at a little bit under 72% of what we expected it to be. And our expenditures are we're spending less than 71% of what we budgeted for. So we are already cutting back a good deal on what we're spending, or we're already doing. I think it's objectively from the numbers a good job of cutting those costs. And I think we have to have the conversation about how we move that revenue number, because there are things that are out of our control with the cost, right? The cost of police is going up, the cost of fire is going up, that line item is going up, we can't change it, right? The King County election costs are going up, the public defense costs might go up. So I think we can tighten our belt, but there's a level that we can't control no matter what we do. We're a small city, we can only control so much of it. So looking at this, keeping that in mind of what people said they want, which is a developed downtown, keeping in mind of that, maybe we can only control the revenue to some degree, we can only control the expenditures to some degree, factors outside our control. But I think it's worth it to try things, to try to improve that. So I think for me, we had several folks come in and talk about local arts. I had a sign project that was worked on for over 6 months that was partnering with local schools to use arts projects that would be probably maybe not even a full $25,000, probably more like $20,000, that already has a design fleshed out, that already had that partnership in place, and signs that actually have studies behind them to drive more people to businesses. And that was taken away in a meeting where the power was out, and the multiple business owners that I had got and told me they wanted that I couldn't tell them to go look at the meeting notes about why this wasn't happening anymore. And it was pulled away at a time when we were transitioning from the main person behind the project. So it's frustrating to me to have that transition happen all at once, and that confluence of events, keeping all these factors in mind that I'm talking about, and keeping in mind that it costs $20,000 to $25,000, which is such a small amount relative to what we have here when we have leftover money as well. And I think what I would like to see is, we talked about grants in our Economic and Community Development Committee. The grants that we talked about was a website that I shared that I had been refreshing the entire time that has not had any grants for projects this small. So I think a project this small, I think, is well within our means. I think it's well within that goal of showing people where their money is going and developing that downtown, which are two stated goals very explicitly. And I think it's a very low stakes project to move forward with, and I would like to see council open their mind to that. I think I agree about I was the first one who brought up the idea of the left turn light. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Director Bronze, that currently it's on schedule for 2026.
I'd have to verify if that sounds about right.
Okay, thank you. I remember it was on schedule for 2028, and right now it's for 2026, which feels to be moving closer and closer now. We can have a conversation about that, if that's worth moving that up 2 years. I'm open to it. I think it's important. I think there's not a question that people would value that. And then the 95th Way Park, I'd be interested to see what an actual design plan would be, because I think, it is a stone's throw from a different elementary school. not in Newcastle, but still, and I think it could potentially receive traffic. So I'd be interested to express that. But I think too the trail system we have and continuing to advocate for that is really critical as well. So I just wanted to put those items out there and share my values there, sort of what we're talking about, how we spend this money.
Thank you, Councilmember Charbonneau. I have a few comments, unless somebody has some more general comments. You have general comments? Go ahead.
Yes. We have had probably enough recommendations from people to spend about twice what we have. And then we've had people say, well, golly gee, this was not meant to be spent on budgeted items. But it seems like in the last 2 or 3 years, we have spent more on budgeted items than what we have left. So I don't know why we're worrying about that side of it. I think that we've got several things that we need to do. We need to make the city safer and make sure that we take care of the safety side of the city. And if we use some of the money that might have been used by budget anyway, I don't think it makes that big a deal. I think that we have the promenade would be something really nice, but I'm not sure we have enough money to even do the promenade. And the sports field would be nice, but I don't think we have enough money to do that either. So I think we need to settle down and figure out what we're going to do and just go with it.
Go ahead, Councilmember Burford. Go ahead.
As we all know, the remaining ARPA fund cannot be added to our reserve. So to promote our community engagement and public safety, I feel strongly that we are seeking Newcastle, our environment. There's a term, it's called third space. Your home, your work, and then the third space, which we all enjoy. So I heard from our residents tonight. They came here, they shared their hope. I think we should really, really support art programs and to nurture our children and for our future. And also, talking about the sports field, also is for our children and for our community. Also will contribute to our public safety. And Newcastle, I want to see, is not just drive by, go through. We want to see they need to go to Newcastle, come here. And the signing project is really important. I was really disappointed when I noticed the historic sign, "Welcome to Newcastle," was moved. Such a perfect location, moved to right now in the commons, also covered by the trees and plants. So I think we should have a better vision when we make our decisions. We also need to listen to our residents. Of course, we can't just say, oh, it would be nice to have this, it would be nice to have that. How to plan holistically and really, really with innovative ideas. And so I think a signing project, like Councilmember Charbonneau said, it doesn't spend that much, but the signs are our identity. We lost Newcastle identity. That historic sign is our history and our identity. It's about our city. A lot of people, they have no idea Newcastle is a city. They just feel like, oh, drive by. I told them when I attend the event, this is a perfect way to promote our city and also promote public safety. Also, I really, really strongly, I listened, I read your email and from our Newcastle Trails president, Gary. I think we have a lot of grants for transportation, for Councilmember Sherlock also mentioned for EV charging. Of course, I'd like to see if we can install some to attract some people, but we don't have to install all of them. And for safe Lake Boring promenade, this is what I say. We don't have we say iconic place. Newcastle, we have a golf course, that area. We need to generate more income from that area. I visited there several times. Sometimes it's like that. It's not really active. So Lake Boring, a lot of cities, they have a river walk. So what Gary shared is really, really amazing plan. I would like to see how we can support that vision and make it become reality. Also, at Flash, as community commission and also our Newcastle Arts Council co-president, mentioned about the community center. Newcastle, we do not have a place together. So I know everything adds up. Of course, I know the math too. So when you talk about, I support public safety. That's also my agenda when I was running. So community engagement. We have, it's the place, Newcastle is for us together. And really, it's a truly faster community and public safety. And we have a face-to-face communication. We know each other. That means volume, speaks volume. It's not like, oh, I heard about something. So we truly need to create that kind of environment, the third place, and also bring our identity back to our city. Let more people know we are in the city of Newcastle. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Burford. I have a few general comments before we move on. So obviously, this is a passionate subject. Everybody has an opinion about what we should do, and it would be great if we could do everything. I look back at how we spent some of this previous ARPA money, and I noticed one thing, right? We got a new city manager recently, and immediately he saved us a whole bunch of money. In the first year that we had ARPA available, we spent almost $900,000 to balance the budget. Why couldn't the council at that time have made the necessary changes that we eventually made and saved money? So we'd have a lot more money now to spend and put towards things if it hadn't been flushed down the toilet. And there's no other way to put it. So last year, and now I appreciate that people want us to look at this very carefully, but where were those people last year when we gave, for example, $161,000 to 8 people? While there was 1,210 total businesses in the city, but only 8 got part of that money. So we haven't been wise with this money. We haven't done anything that benefits all of the people. There's a reason why this council chamber is generally empty. It's because people are out living their lives, trying to survive from the inflation and making do with scarcity of goods and just being involved in their families. They're expecting us at this council dais to look out for them. Not the few people always come and say something, right? Good for you, but the majority of the people that expect fiscal responsibility and public safety. And the Finance Committee, kudos to them, have wrapped both up in one lump sum here, financial responsibility and public safety. By taking some of these costs and putting them into ARPA, we're making a better general fund. And so guess what that means? We're not going to tax people, right? Why would we do that, right? What's the best way to generate business in the city is give people their own money. Let them keep their own money. And that's historical facts. If you have more money, you're going to go out and you're going to spend it in local business or give it to charity. You're not going to go and you know, that's the way to generate money. That's my opinion. People don't have to agree. So I'm very happy that we're finally, after we've let some of this let go and we haven't been able to do the right things with it, that we're finally going to put it where it's going to benefit all the people. So that's my comments. That's all I have to say about that. And besides, this is taxpayer money, every cent. no government makes money. They're all, every cent is taxpayer money. And they're giving it back and spending it for the people. That's what we're doing. Putting their own money to good use. Okay, do I have any motions on the floor?
I have one.
Okay, we'll take a couple more comments. Councilmember Sherlock.
Thank you. I disagree that spending a lot of this ARPA money on increased public safety costs that are absolutely necessary. I'm in favor of paying those. But to say that using these one-time funds to defer raising taxes for a couple years is fiscally responsible, I'm sorry, but I completely disagree with that statement. It's not fiscally responsible because what are we gonna do in 2027 when we have all agreed that we want to continue paying for all this public safety and we have no plan to pay for it in the future? So I just want to say that on record. That's where I'm coming from. I am absolutely in favor. I made the motion to add a 12th officer. Now I made that motion to use ARPA funds for 2024, and the reason why I felt like that was a good thing was when you add an officer the first 9 months, so almost the majority of that is a one-time fee because you have to pay for their training before you actually get the officer in the building. Now moving forward, when if the officers, we all have talked about how there's a recruitment issue with King County, hopefully they're figuring that out as soon as possible. But I do want to ask the question, I don't know if anyone can answer it, but if we do end up allocating money, some of this money, to pay for a police officer, the 12th officer for 2025 and 2026, and that officer is not given to us, and that money is then refunded to us, does anyone know, have we spent that money or have we not? Do you understand what I'm asking?
It's spent.
Okay. But we would not get anything out of it. Yeah, it's spent, okay, that's fine. That's fine if that's the answer. I just wanted to ask the question and make sure. But my point is, if that happens, there's nothing to show for it. So I've put together my plan. That's where I am. I would be happy to go through with anyone. This meeting is getting long, and I don't want to belabor it right now on the dais, but I would be happy to anyone who wants to meet with me and go through why I focused on the ones that I did, because honestly, everything on this list it's either already budgeted and we're going to do it regardless if it's used for ARPA money or not, or it's a good idea in my opinion. I would like to move forward in other ways to make that happen, including the Lake Bourne Promenade project. I think that's a great project. I just, in talking with staff, it doesn't seem like this money needs to be spent very quickly, and I just don't think that there's enough time to bring that to fruition with this money. But that doesn't mean that I don't support that project, so I just wanted to say that out loud. Thank you.
Councilman Griffin.
You were in a town hall meeting 2 years ago, and there was 150 people there. I counted them, and that included 7 of the council members and probably 5 of the staff in that meeting. In that meeting, it was asked 3 times of the people that were there, what would you like to spend this money on? And 3 times, the majority of the people said sustainability. They voted for sustainability. And guess what? We didn't spend any of the money so far for sustainability. Now, does that make sense?
Any motions on the floor?
Yes. I move that the council adopt the recommendation of how the use of the balance of the ARPA money as brought by the Finance Committee be submitted and voted on tonight.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor, motion on the floor that the council adopt the recommendations of how to use the balance of the ARPA as brought by the Finance Committee. It's been first and seconded. Councilmember Griffin, do you want to speak to your motion?
Yes, I think it's a thing to do, really, folks. I really believe it, that this is something we need to get behind us and not have to worry about it for the rest of the year or how we're going to spend it. So.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Lakota, do you want to speak to your second?
No, I think a lot has already been discussed, so we're good to go.
Councilmember Charbonneau?
I move to amend the motion on the floor to add $25,000 for wayfinding signs to the Finance Committee's recommendations.
Second.
Okay, we have an amendment to the original motion to add $25,000 for wayfaring signs to the ARPA disbursement, essentially. Okay, it was been first and seconded. Councilmember Charbonneau, do you want to speak to your motion?
Thank you. Yeah, this is a 6-month to a year project. I looked at grants the entire time. I've yet to find one. To not be able to do something as small as $25,000 with the amount of money we've put forth, it frankly feels draconian. And I want to be able to work with this council, and I understand not piloting a $1.2 million stoplight turn. I understand, looking at the bigger dollar items, but this isn't a large dollar item, and I think it's a very visible thing that people have already publicly stated they would value.
Councilmember Sherlock, do you want to speak to your second?
I support this.
Okay, we have an amendment to the original motion to add $25,000 for wayfaring signs from the ARPA funds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
No. Okay, the motion fails 3-4. Councilmembers Charbonneau, Sherlock, and Burford in favor. Okay, back to the original motion. The original motion on the floor is that the council adopt the recommendations of how to use the balance of the ARPA funds as brought forth by the Finance Committee. All in favor say aye. 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 All opposed? No. Motion passes 4-3. Councilmembers Tallman, Deputy Mayor Lakota, Mayor Clark, and Councilmember Griffin in favor. Okay. Moving on, we now have additional public comment. City Clerk, do we have anybody signed up? Okay. Oh. Peggy signed up, but she's not here. So, members of the audience, you want to? Please, come on up. Neither did we. And please state your name again.
Kevin Horton.
Thank you, Kevin.
Two things resonated from Mr. Braun's statement. One is that 116th Avenue is a collective arterial. I never knew that it had a name. And two, that people who wanted to go 40 miles an hour are going to go 40 miles an hour whether you have signs or not. Those are both true things. Personally, my reasoning behind this need is that it is a collective. People come off the 405, they come up 76th, they turn to come down 116th Avenue to either go into Newcastle or to continue moving north to wherever they're going. They don't live here, they go through here. Those, to my way of thinking, are probably the vast majority of the people that are speeding on that road. Because, I don't know about you, but if I've been driving 60 miles an hour and I get off on a road, my mind is still doing 60 miles an hour. You have to gear down to slow down. So the other thing that resonated with me that I was kind of surprised, of all the lists of the things that he had as solutions, he didn't have cameras that would take a picture of you when you were speeding. I realize that that's something that's recently become a viable option. For you folks looking at all these other things like widening the stripes, roundabouts, humps versus bumps, etc., and also the solar panel driven speed signs, all of those have merit. I don't argue the pros and cons of those. But what I will say is this: if you get into my wallet, I'm going to slow down. And if you start making people pay to speed, they're going to slow down. At least I know I would. It only takes one ticket, and after a couple more, then your insurance company lets you know that you're going to slow down too. So if you're looking for revenue, that's another way to find some revenue. And I'm curious if you have an opportunity, if you can ask your Renton neighbors and your Bellevue neighbors, those people, have they put speed cameras in some of their arterials? And has it shown to be effective? Or has it slowed people down? I'm sure that the solar paneled speed signs work to a degree, because I can see it. I honestly can see it when I walk up and down that street. When it was lit, before it was taken away to move to the other location where it is now, you literally saw people hit their brake lights as the sign said 40 or 38 or whatever it said. They'd hit the brake lights because your mind goes, somebody's watching, and it makes them slow down. There's no doubt in my mind that they work. Beyond that, though, the only other thing that I think that will work is that if you get in their wallet, then people stop speeding pretty quickly. And I think most of the people that go through there, aren't us. They're not locals. They're working their way through to go somewhere else. So their mind is somewhere else. It's not on the town.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate the second. Okay, moving on. No Zooms or anything, right, City Clerk? Okay. Planning calendar, City Manager. Oh, I'm sorry. Please come on up. No, it's a public meeting. Come on.
Hi, I'm Guy Granger. I live in the Olympus neighborhood. I've lived there for 27 years, so a year and a half after incorporation. Am I speaking loud enough to be heard?
Can everybody hear? Yeah.
Regarding the ARPA funds, I'm a big fan of public safety. I'm concerned that in 2027, what we may have voted for is either a major tax increase being required, and so we're not being fiscally responsible, and we should be fully open to the public in decisions like this, that while it's a savings this year and next, for 2027, we're either looking potentially at a drastic step function reduction in services, safety related, or a drastic need for increased taxes. So as long as that message goes with the decision, I think I'll be fine. Regarding traffic calming on 116th, enforcement cameras have a long and varied reputation. I saw a report of one in Black Diamond where a certain enforcement camera set on a similar road that had a lot of speeding activity. In terms of people that were deliberately speeding, it became a game where kids would remove their license plates and try to set the fastest speed through the enforcement camera. So a study is a very good thing, and we'll gather a lot of good information to help, but nothing is a panacea. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, planning calendar, City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. So for April 2nd, that's going to be our long study session. In the update last Friday to the council, I had 6 items in there. Just want to put it back in front of the council whether we need more than an hour for that. We do have a couple of things that will garner some discussion and some at least explaining and whatnot from staff. For the regular meeting, we will have our state lobbyist here to do an end of session presentation. What we want to do as a part of that is we want to kind of piggyback on that to have Director Fitzgibbons talk about housing bills, both last year and this, and kind of the effect of those, how they might affect the comp plan, and answer some of the questions that we've had regarding those and their impact, what we can and can't do about them, etc. And so we'll kind of piggyback on Holly's presentation on the end of legislative session and then we'll take on the housing bills portion of that, just so that we're getting some information in front of the council as far as impacts, and then have an opportunity for the council to be able to ask questions and get questions answered as far as how those impact the city. We'll also have the first budget amendment, as we've been talking about. That'll primarily be our carry forward, first budget amendment of the year. So putting actual fund balances into the budget, and then the pandemic relief plan amendments that you just discussed.
Can we get the resolution on the speed signs into next meeting, please?
Yes, we can get that done for April 2nd.
Okay. Questions for the city manager? Councilman Shaw, go ahead.
Thanks. So are you suggesting that we need more than an hour for the retreat part?
I don't know.
So I'll weigh in on that. The city manager and I kind of discussed, he came to us the deputy mayor and I meet with him every other week to plan this meeting. So we was asking about, hey, we have these things that the staff needs some guidance on. So for example, the first one on the list is, where do we go with our parks capital budget, for example, right? Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but, where do we take the next big step here or there? And the two main things on the calendar were, Lake Bourne Park or Sports Park, for example, right? So, we want to give the staff direction because the next steps have not been detailed out, engineered out, planned out, priced out. So we need to know, and that's an example. So just when you come to the meeting, have your ideas about what do we tell them, where do we want to go, where do we put our emphasis? And then the other items on there were similar. We just wanted to essentially give direction to the staff. What do we do?
Yeah, there's a couple of items where we want to make sure the council has information, but then several things that then we want feedback and guidance on the impacts of that information. And so,
and also the town hall kind of a preparation discussion as well.
Thanks. So I guess I was just, I want time to discuss all that. It looks like the 16th is pretty light though. So
the 16th is light. I think we're going to have a couple of council members out of town, and so we were trying to take that into consideration.
Yeah, we're just trying to accommodate schedules.
So I guess my question is, do we want to go a little earlier, or we can plan on bringing the discussion back into the regular meeting? I just want to be aware of the other things going on in that meeting that will garner some time in the regular meeting, I mean. And so I'm happy to start at 6, but I would love to be able to get through getting the guidance we want from the council.
6 o'clock, any objections to 6 o'clock? Okay, I'll try 6 o'clock.
Thank you.
Anything else, city manager? Anybody else? Okay, with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.